Thank you for joining us for the special meeting of the City Council, the budget study session to review fiscal year 25-26. And let the minutes reflect all council members are present, and I will call the meeting to order. We'll start out with public comment.
Good afternoon. Is the mic on? Hello? Is that better? Still? Okay, I can't hear it. Jamie Irons, resident Morro Bay. Thanks to council and staff for their recent fresh paving and striping in town. It's been a notable improvement. I just want to appreciate that. My request for this budget is the allocation of funds for annual striping. To be specific, I've submitted written requests during past budget cycles to allocate funds to refresh striping of intersections and pedestrian routes with a focus on high-use areas such as around the school areas, high-traffic areas such as downtown, Main Street, and the waterfront. Last night at public comment, I asked why enhancements to improve the pedestrian safety at the 41 Main Street intersection wasn't on our city goals. To be clear, I wasn't asking for it to be on the city goals. I was asking because some of the comments about safety of our high school kids at the 41 and Main Street, if there was such a grave concern, why was there not an outcry or input at city goal setting to have that placed on city goals last year or the year before? That's why, in my opinion, the high school kids are being unfairly used as an excuse to say no to the roundabout. The following is a brief list of crosswalks in need of refreshing. Morro Bay High School at the entry, the crosswalks on Atascadero Road, San Jacinto, the Safe Routes to School crosswalks at Cedar and Greenwood, Morro Bay Boulevard roundabout crosswalks. All of the downtown should be assessed and prioritized. Linda Connolly made comments about Morro Bay Boulevard last night. From Bernardo to Piney, there's no center line traffic line at all. And coming down that in the evening is a little bit unsettling. I understand PG&E will be doing some lighting upgrades. I'll submit a list of lighting upgrades that I think would be beneficial for us as too. That would be my list and request for safety and pedestrian safety specifically for the budget. Thank you very much.
My name is Homer Alexander. First, I want to compliment the finance director on keeping this budget process on schedule, especially considering that she lost her number 2 in February and lost the person responsible for preparing this budget a month ago. The budget that you are about to review reflects the staff's recommendations on how the residents' taxes and fees should be spent. I believe, and I think you would agree, that the city's budget should reflect your priorities and those of your constituents, not just the staff's recommendations. Remember that when you approve the budget next month, it will become your budget. I have 2 examples for you to consider on how you might put your stamp on it. The first is to follow the recommendations made last night by the Public Works Director to provide initial funding for a potential short-term safety improvements at the 41 and Main intersection. That can easily be accomplished by just moving money from another general government capital project to this new project, with the understanding that the money from this new capital project would come from somebody else's priority. The second suggestion is to use the $1.2 million that will be returned to Measure Q&E from the roundabout project to truly put the general fund in balance. This will entail transferring additional police and fire personnel costs to Q&E, which will reduce the proposed expenditures in the general fund so they will match revenue. Doing this, along with a couple other minor adjustments, would eliminate the need to use a portion of the unassigned general fund balance. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council, staff. I've been, again, like super critical of the budget of this town for a couple different reasons. But I'm just going to make a general statement after reviewing the details as well as the CFAC meeting from a couple weeks ago. And my general comments is, yeah, and I thought about this a couple times. Will my generation, the generation after me, be able to survive in this town on the infrastructure that is today with the budget and all the details that have been put together? And the answer is no. The budget, my opinion, is short-sighted. It lacks revenue growth and strategies. It's over-indexed on soft costs like consulting and administration, while major capital liabilities remain underfunded. And this isn't the first time that this has been brought up. In watching the CFAC meeting, over and over and over again, there are calls to action for more details. There are calls to action for more revenue opportunities. That is not a Nick DeAngelis thing. That is what is going to allow for sustainability of the town in the future. And as far as I'm concerned, we are still talking about capital allocations that have really no bearing for how the city is going to survive long after all of us are here, long after all of us are involved. And quite frankly, what I want for my children is to be able to have their own children and be able to be here just like I was, and I don't see how that's going to be possible. We're continuing to talk about over-allocated and bloated capital expenditures. We can continue to do that, but at the end of the day, this was reviewed a few months ago. The same amount of projects exist then as they do now, and they are not generating anything on the top line. You can have a great downtown with a lot of sidewalks, but if you don't have any revenue implications, it's not going to make a difference. I believe that what we need to be solving for is revenue growth. Key items that justify a little bit of my criticism: there's no bold revenue strategy. Rising operating costs with no operational reform. Just to be clear, I've managed billions and billions of dollars of a budget. We have more people on staff than I've ever had in billion-dollar businesses. And quite frankly, what it calls for us to do is to look internally and actually find out what is happening so that we can continue to grow the city, continue to build our infrastructure so that everything survives long after all of us are here. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? AGP, are there any raised hands in the queue?
No, Madam Mayor, there are no raised hands in the queue.
Thank you. If there's no further public comment, I will close and bring it back to council and ask City Manager Kimball to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Emily and I are pleased to present this draft operating and the capital budget to the City Council. One of the city manager's fundamental responsibilities is to oversee the development and submission of the proposed budget. And I won't be able to do that without this amazing woman by my side and all the departments and the City Council and the community support. Essentially, a budget is a plan, so I'm going to want to go over this agenda. So that's my remark, and then after that, and then we'll have some finance director is going to talk about the budget level discussion, and then with City Council can give us a direction. So that's the lay of land. I'm sorry, I jump ahead. And so now I go back to the budget purpose. So essentially, budget is really just a plan about revenues and then expenditures, where money come from, where what do we do with the money. And in our city, is revenue there. In city revenue, we'll have these blocks of the revenue sources, taxes and permits and bring revenue, rents and user fees. Investments is a part of revenue source, and grants is also part of revenue source. Now, the expenditure, these are the major blocks of the expenditures: salary, pension, operation, capital projects, and reserves. So reserves is part of the expenditure. And this budget is not just a spreadsheet, and it's actually contain policy documents in our budget. It's also serve as a operation guide, and it is a communication tool in that our budget meet the meet the GFOA's Distinguished Budget Award standards. So our budget need to be able to communicate, to tell a story, which ours do. I can go into that later in some detail. And our budget the development schedule start in January of each year and then finish by the end of June. And then we focus on implementation beginning of the year, which is July 1st, until to the year end, June 30th. It is really a year-long process, so it's very significant. It's a project that we city staff do not take lightly. And with all that, we are happy to say that we're presenting the city budget, the city council, and the city with a balanced and accurate budget. The total budget this year consists of $53.5 million, which is a reduction from last year. And this appropriation across 30 funds, 10 departments and divisions, and we also, below the state, impose appropriation limits. These are the things, it seems a lot of time being taken for granted, but I say these things is because they are very significant. Local government budget is a little bit different than private budgets in many ways. For example, we have so many funds. We also have state requirement what we can do and cannot do. To develop a budget, we first want to assess the city's physical health to see where we are. So to take a snapshot of our condition, so we see we really will have very strong cash portfolio. And I get this $87 million, this number out of our last investment report. So we have so much cash in the city's coffer. And then our investment have been doing very well and has high yields. And we also have very, very robust fund balance. In general fund, we have over 30 million of general fund balance. This number is from the financial statement, the audited financial statement as of June 30th of 2024. We also distinguish from other cities and organizations is that we have a large portfolio of real estate, and that has not been, is there, but has not really been generating as much revenue as perhaps that we all of us would like to. And we also have a lot of other funding sources, such as grants, and we have ongoing grants to fund projects. We also have low-interest loans that we use for some of our critical water and sewer facilities. So these are our strengths, and we do have some priorities that we wanted to fund, and then sometimes they're competing with each other. We all know that the cost conducting business has been increasing all over across the board and across the region. For example, the insurance rates are going up, the regional services are going up. We don't see that, and regional services, including the fees we pay for the county, for county sheriff, for county, for dispatch services, animal control services, and our pension, of course, our pension liability going up. And we have some strategy to deal with pension, of course, but they are some examples of rising costs. And also the broader economic uncertainty that we're dealing with at the federal level, the tariff, and this just very uncertain. So whenever we're thinking about funding project, then we're it's unknown. We don't know what is going to happen. And also our local economy is volatile. We are projecting a slow but and steady growth on our revenue sources, such as and TOT and sales tax. But because our city, the revenue source are our economy is tourism based, and we don't have a large employer that generate a lot of taxes for us. So we are mainly just relying on property tax, sales tax, and TOT, and we'll have user fees, of course. But not sure what's going to happen with the tourism industry, so these are kind of volatile. That's on the revenue end. And then on the expenditure end, our capital needs, we have over 30 capital projects identified, and we mainly just don't have the resources and adequate staff to implement all the project at one time. So we really have to prioritize which one we can find within the available resource. And then we also have some long-term needs that we're aware, but it's not quite plugged in the budget just yet, such as the One Water plan identified many drainage, water, and sewer-related projects that we do not have a identified source to pay for just yet. And then we also have public safety needs and infrastructure needs for public safety, such as I know yesterday we didn't get to that, and the Center's cover report is going to suggest that the fire service is going to need, would recommend more infrastructure to support fire service needs, and police department have needs as well. Those infrastructure needs are going to be ongoing. Also, this budget we want to consider to sustain some of the existing work, existing accomplishment has been in works, and then we can't just ignore them or wanna continue them. For example, we have those claims that we filed with FEMA following the 2023 storm, and that's still pending, and that need the city staff to continue work on them, so then we can get those money back. Short-term rental regulation review and monitoring, we already made a very good progress on it, and then we need to continue with that, and then those require staff time. Public safety efforts that we have made, such as homelessness, and for example, the homelessness issue, they're not going away, although they're not being identified as a new priority, but they are there, they're in the background, and we're continue working on that. And all these things are examples that, although they're not showing up at your document, they are being worked on, and they require resources, and something that we need to be mindful for. And then lastly, we have new goals. City Council has just identified, adopted 3 new priorities, which we can require resources to implement. So moving on. So we have some challenges, but in order to address these challenges, I want to give the council some examples of how we get to the budget that we are able to present it to you. We implement these measures. We talk about cost control. So we were very precise with our expenditure estimates, and we wanted to the line item level, and so budget line by line. We want to see each department to request something that can be justified, not just based on baseline. Last year I recommend this, and so this year I'm going to request the same thing. We want to eliminate that. We want to be accurate so that we can free up resources. And then we also updating on the revenue end. We we're evaluating and updating our fee schedule. And so the new master fee schedule will be brought before the city council in August. And this budget, as in draft format, does not include a proposed fee schedule just yet. We also look at cost allocation. We want to make sure that the cost being allocated accurately, and to if it's general fund cost, then they go to general fund. But if general fund, if it's not general fund, then they can be distributing among other funds, so that the general fund can be free up to do larger projects like capital improvement project. And really, we're taking a priority. We take a priority-based concept when we dealing with this budget. We want to some project may not be we may not have resource to deal with it. So let's just trying to stretch it out, but we're still going to find it just over a longer period, so that we have enough resource to address the needs. And then there is a new position under this year's budget, proposing this year's budget, which is the new project manager under utility fund. So that the goal for that was for provide enhanced staffing so that we can carry out more capital projects. And we also look at hiring slowdown, non-essential vacancies. We just let it open longer so that departments can evaluate and then to fill it as appropriate. Of course, the technology, and we use technology. We also really emphasize on cross-function collaboration, department helping each other so that we can achieve better efficiency. We also need renegotiate contracts, and this year, one of the new features of the budget was that we want each department to have some goal to come up with statements, storytelling in their own department sections to talk about how each department going to address the city council adopted goals. Talking about goals, city council adopted these goals, and these 3 goals has provided strategic level of direction for the budget preparation. And then we're just going to go quickly. And this budget, we are using those awards, those GFOA standards, and then California Society of Municipal Finance Officer standards to develop the budget. The city's budget has been award-winning budget for many, many years, and we anticipate this one, once adopted, we'll be submitting them to these 2 organizations to apply for awards as well. So these are being able to win these awards is a testament of the level of talents of this team of staff, and I think it is really a great accomplishment for the city and for the finance department. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Emily to give you a presentation on the budget account from the budget fund budget level.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon. I want to quickly introduce to you all Melissa Atchison, who's with us today, new finance manager. We're thrilled to have her on board, and she's here to assist if there's any research or questions to answer on the fly as well. And we shall dive right into the details. So starting with the budget in brief, we are putting forth for your consideration today a balanced operating budget with citywide revenues at $46.6 million and expenses at $41.6 million. The citywide expenditure budget net of transfers is 53.5 million. That's 39.7 operating and 13.8 million for capital, with a reserve balance estimated to be $14.5 million. The operating budget has a general fund operating budget of 20.1 million. Measure QE is 3.5 million. Harbor 2.2, water 5.1, sewer 4.2, and the other revenue, governmental revenue funds, 4.6 million in total. The near-term fiscal outlook is that major revenues are projected to increase moderately. We've got property taxes increasing at approximately 5%. As a reminder, that number comes from the county. Sales and use tax, we're projecting a 3% increase over prior year. TOT, approximately 2% increase. Current services is projected to be decreasing by about 3%. I want to throw in there that we do anticipate an increase in those revenues if the council does adopt the updated user fee study and master fee schedule. Those numbers are not increased in this proposed budget. And we'll bring that to you in August. Personnel costs are projected to increase by about 3.5% in total, with the annual UAL, or unfunded accrued liability cost, increasing by about 13%. And another reminder, we do realize about 3% savings by paying in an annual lump sum. All funds are expected to meet the reserve policies for this proposed budget year, with minimum city reserves equating to about 39% of operating. The personnel costs presented in this budget include placeholders for costs or actuals for cost of living increases going forward in out years through the contracted years. And then so that takes us through 26, 27, and then in out years, there's a more moderate increase for personnel. And those projections will be based on actual negotiated contracts. Looking at the citywide proposed revenues, overall the citywide revenues are projected to decrease by a net of 2%. We could see that increase by user fees. We could see that increase by mutual aid as well. But for this proposed budget, there's a net decrease of 2%. As we reviewed in the prior slide, property taxes, sales and use tax, TOT, franchise fees, interfund revenue transfers are looking at an increase, while we're seeing a decrease in intergovernmental revenues. Mutual aid will be considered at mid-year. Licenses and permits, current services, and the use of money and property. And then in August, as I said, the user fee study report will be brought to you with an updated master fee schedule for your review and approval, and that revenue may increase. Well, it's likely to increase. Looking at this another way, we can see that citywide, the largest piece of the revenue pie comes from current services. That includes all funds, so we're talking about utilities, our water, sewer, our harbor, and our general fund. The next largest piece of that pie is sales and use tax, followed by property tax, and then the smaller wedges are represented by other revenues, TOT, intergovernmental revenues, use of money and property, which really just means rent income and interest income, licenses and permits, and the franchise fees. Taking a high-level look at citywide expenditures, overall the citywide expenditures are projected to decrease by 10%. Net of transfers, that's a decrease of 8%. We're seeing a decrease in all major objects except for personnel, which are up 3.5%. And as a note, that debt service, where you see a decrease of 54.2%, that's over a prior year budgeted amount. And we were assuming we would have to begin repayment of the SRF loan in 24-25, and due to the amendment, we can postpone that repayment to September of 2027. And we will be bringing in that mutual aid revenue and expenditure budget at mid-year based on actuals. So taking a look at the budget by major object code or type of expenditure across all funds and departments. 75% of this budget is spent on personnel costs and services, split nearly evenly, with services at 40% of the total budget and personnel at 35% of the total budget. The remaining budget in less than 10% portions are split between capital outlay, other expenses, debt service, and supplies. Other expense category includes things like payments to other agencies like community grants, dispatch services, animal control, Chamber of Commerce contract, funding for affordable housing, and utilities rebates are all recorded there. The capital outlay portion includes purchase of vehicles, vessels, equipment, and costs related to capital projects such as machinery and planning and permitting costs. And the debt services payments against 2 loans, WIFIA for the WRF and the state of California for the solar panels and HVAC replacement. The citywide services budget, in meeting with you all last week, we did get a question about what all is included in that big chunk of the pie for services. So I wanted to highlight that here for you. I actually didn't mean to include every little thing, but the ones in bold are the big ones, over $1 million each. So consulting services at 1.6 million, contractual services at 12.4, engineering at 1.7, and insurance at 3 million here. Everything else on this screen is less than $1 million. For consulting services, I want to let you know that $765,000 is budgeted in enterprise funds, IT fund, and economic development fund, and the capital improvements fund. So in the other half or so, $726,000 is in the general fund for a multitude of objectives. For example, $375,000 of that is the grant-funded waterfront master plan, so that cost will be recovered by grant revenue. There are also costs for lobbying on our behalf, for legal services, for financial reporting and actuarial services, mandated cost reimbursement, claim preparation, sales tax specialist services, cost allocation plan update, which we're due to complete in full in this coming year. On-call arborists, biologists, short-term rental compliance services, and services related to Morrow Elementary. That's $25,000 estimate there towards your city goal. Plan check and also plan check and permit services. The developer reimbursement agreement funds have $150,000 for services, and those are fully funded by the agreements. Nothing's coming out of city funds. The contractual services of $11 million is budgeted for capital improvement projects across the governmental water, sewer, and harbor funds. $860,000 is budgeted in the general fund for things like animal shelter services, or dispatch services, or on-call professionals for plumbing and electrical and locksmith, roofing, HVAC, anything that might come up like that. The cleanup of the unhoused encampments, bird deterrence or falconer services, on-call tree maintenance, janitorial services, street sweeping. Measure Q&E has $270,000 for on-call road striping and curb repairs, the painting of city facilities, and the resurfacing of the Monty Young tennis courts. And I don't know if anyone else is excited about this, but there's $60,000 budgeted in the facilities maintenance fund for recarpeting City Hall, which would be great to get rid of those yellow tape stripes. And the engineering services is $1.5 million, and that's budgeted for capital improvement projects. $60,000 is budgeted in the fund for developer reimbursement agreements, again, fully funded by the developers and not coming out of city funds. The remaining $104,000 there is budgeted in the general fund for fire sprinkler engineering, on-call services for geotechnical engineering, stormwater post-construction inspections, development plan review, traffic engineering, and city surveyor services. And I think there's one more slide, and this one is the one that jumps out high dollar is a state water contract that comes out of the water fund. So we do pay a lot for services, and it goes to serve our community. So I hope that was helpful in highlighting what we're paying for there. So going on to personnel, we do see in this budget a request for 2 new positions. One is a conversion of 4 part-time maintenance aide positions into 1 full-time permanent consolidated maintenance worker. That's funded in the general fund. The other proposed position is a utilities project manager. This would better position the city to execute on its multi-year capital improvement plan for the water and sewer funds and would be funded in those same funds. That would take our 115.5 FTE to 117.5 FTE citywide across all funds. If we're looking at part-time, we'll see a decrease from 27.2 to 25 part-time temporary FTE. The changes are in the city manager HR budget and the fire seasonal firefighters in public works and in harbor to get to that net 2.2 decrease. So now honing in on the general fund, the revenues are projected to decrease overall by 3.5%. Property taxes again up to 5.6%. Intergovernmental revenues up 181%. That's due to $495,000 in state grants, $375,000 for the waterfront master plan, and an estimated $120,000 remains from the 24-25 offshore wind feasibility study with the county. Current services decrease is due to the mutual aid revenue not being budgeted now, but will be budgeted at mid-year based on actuals. Other revenues decrease due to the decrease in the development reimbursement revenue. The use of money is down due to the estimated interest. I wanted to be a bit conservative on what we expect to get in this coming year for interest, given the state of the economy and uncertainty there. And the transfers were higher last year from ARPA and from the development impact fee. We utilized those funds for the impact fee study. Projected revenues by source. The big three revenues here together constitute 67% or almost 2/3 of the general fund revenues. And those are from their property taxes, TOT, and sales and use tax. Revenue from current services make up about 10%, and the remaining are less than 10% each. The transfers in from other funds. The cost for the cost allocation plan, licenses and permits, franchise fees. We have 4 franchise fees: gas, electric, cable, and garbage. Use of money and property, meaning rental income and investment interest. Intergovernmental revenue, which includes mandated cost reimbursements, post-subvention, impound fees, grants, etc. The cannabis tax, and other fines and forfeitures. The proposed expenses for the general fund are overall basically even with last year, a decrease of 0.2%, which could be found in supplies, uniform and safety equipment. Other expenditures, which is a decrease in the community grants from $60,000 to $35,000 due to the ending of the ARPA funding. And the capital outlay consolidated maintenance equipment in 24-25 is not budgeted here. There is an increase in capital outlay to purchase a towable boom lift. The boom lift truck is estimated to cost over $200,000. That's a cheaper alternative to allow the division to safely install banners on streetlights, make repairs to city facilities, and maintain street trees. If we take a look by expenditures by department, we'll see that Public Works, Police, and the Fire comprise about 2/3 of the general fund expenditures, followed by Community Development, Recreation, City Manager's Cluster, including City Manager's Office, Human Resources, City Clerk, Administrative Services, the City Attorney, and the City Council. This is the end of the presentation on the general fund. Does anyone want to stop for questions at this point?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember LaFay, questions to this point?
The one question that really highlighted, I looked at the services and some of the figures, like $888,000 for electricity, $760,000, and I expressed this to who's overseeing that here at the city in the sense of a lot of these services are either on contracts or license fees. You know, it seemed to me that those figures are just, I mean, I thought they were extraordinary, but I imagine you're just totaling up the electric bills. And has anyone approached PG&E and tried to get cost savings, energy discounts, and things like that? I'm just questioning, are we just paying the bills, or are we actually analyzing a little bit and trying to talk to people to get the services down a little bit?
That's a great question. So for PG&E, those costs are citywide. So I wanted to emphasize that. It's for the lights that are on right now, our mics, everything that's working in every city facility. So that it also includes our water treatment facility, city hall, recreation, community services, et cetera. Yes, that contract has been looked at since City Manager Kimball arrived. That was looked at, and due to her meeting with PG&E, we renegotiated that to a different tier and realized some savings there. What was the second category you mentioned?
License fees for software.
Oh. Yeah.
Utilizing all this software and,
Yeah.
or some of it outdated. It seems awful
Yeah.
lot of money per year.
Yeah. So we are utilizing all of those services, and that gets looked at very closely and managed by myself and my department, IT department. So the reason I know that we utilize all those is because we have a new reporting requirement as of 2 years ago that requires that I report out, I think it's GASB 96. I have to report out on all of those agreements, software agreements, SABITAs. So we do look at those. We do try to renegotiate those. Our IT manager is very diligent at always trying to get a better deal. So I can assure you those are closely managed. Thanks for the question.
I was the council member that asked for the services to be itemized. I think it's just helpful for me because that was such a big category, and I thought it warranted breaking it down a little bit. So thank you so much for doing that, Emily, and so quickly. To follow up on Councilmember LaFay's question, well, one thing I wanted to find out about is, so for instance, under service budget, like with the maintenance contracts of $244,000, would that stay the same with the budget ask to hire another maintenance employee, or is that number anticipating hiring another employee?
I don't know if I can get to that level of detail with what I have here.
Okay.
I can respond to that briefly,
Great.
that I think Finance Director Conrad already mentioned that the cost for that additional maintenance worker employee is offset by us eliminating 4 part-time positions. And so there's no real crossover with the maintenance contracts there. The maintenance contracts that are out of the maintenance division are typically very specific. One of them is a street sweeper, so we have a street sweeper that goes around town. Another is for a falconer. Those are services that we wouldn't be able to provide in-house.
Okay, thank you. And then, let's see. And like for the telephone, I mean, that's like $11,000 a month. Is that for just landlines, or is that for, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm doing some inventory in my mind here. Yes, so it's for telephone services. It's for some internet is included in there because that particular vendor provides it. And it would be, again, citywide, every office, every department, every building.
Okay. And all of these things, like we audit all of these expenses, these service expenses, to like make sure that they're as lean as they possibly can be. Like I see somewhere, space rental. It's not a very big number, but we do have a whole extra building, that we have, and I'm wondering why we need a space rental. I guess my question is, are all of these expenses like really looked at and kind of pared down as much as possible?
I have to honestly say that looking at each and every contract for utilities, I'm not
Yeah.
yet looking at each of one of those to make sure we're getting the very best deal we possibly can. So hopefully I can at some point, but I'm honestly haven't done an itemized review. As far as storage, for example, each department head sat down with them, and they went through every line of their budget and cut everything they absolutely could. So if you see something there for storage, it's because not storage, space rental, it's because it's needed. So I don't have that at the tip of my fingers here, but I can get back to you on what that is.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then one other question. So we're looking at hiring or having a total staff size of 117. Do we know, I know that we look a lot at what other cities pay for employees and we compare ourselves in a lot of ways. Do we know, like, if that's an average number for a town of our size to have a staff of that size? If I do the math right, that's like 1 employee per 85 residents, and a lot of the homes, a lot of the, I don't know, are they full-time residents or are they? I don't know how that's calculated really, and so I'm just wondering if that's kind of in the ballpark of what's average.
Let me try to answer that question. I can do we can do an analysis and pull each city's data and then do a comparison, give you a more accurate answer. I wanted to say that Morro Bay is the city that provide full service. No other city have this level of service that we provide. City of SLO, they have a different kind of services and they're larger, so probably not a good comparison for us. City of Grover Beach is perhaps you can say it's comparable. However, they do not have fire department, and I don't believe they have as robust a recreation as we do as well. And also, they do not have a harbor. So
I meant like cities our size in the state. I didn't mean necessarily in our county. I just meant like, is that typical for, and in like, obviously you would want to compare apples to apples with as far as full service cities. I just wondered. I guess that's something to look into. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A bit of a follow-up to the questions that have been asked, and I've spoken with Director Kwolek about this about 3 quarters ago, and so I think this is more of a question for the city manager. Just in looking at the contract and consulting services, those total $14 million, and I know a fair amount of that is mandatory with some contracts that we need to outsource. But I keep coming back to this concept, city manager, if we're spending, let's say out of that 14, at least 10 or $12 million on consulting and contract services, what portion of that, if any, could be brought in-house? And this is there's no right or wrong. This isn't a black and white question, because it's a balancing act between adding expenses on one hand to the expense side of our income statement with additional personnel, but on the other hand, reducing the expenses on the contract and consulting. My belief would be, or my hope would be, that there would be some efficiencies and some gain to be had by, if there are possibilities to bring someone in-house, that would result in better services on a sustained basis over time to the city. So
okay.
Can you comment on that? And does that proposition make any sense at all, or no sense? And is it something that we could continue to examine moving forward?
Well, thank you for the question. We certainly want to continue to examine that and that the possibility of in-house versus contract. It's really, it's always depends. The answer to your question just depends. This one will have like $12.4 million in contractual services. A lot of them are because our water and sewer, that large project, work project. And then a lot of times when you do these large capital projects, they require very specialized expertise to do certain things, and it would not be efficient for the city to hire somebody on a long-term base to provide the benefits and salary, and one person would not be able to provide that kind of expertise. But we will continue to look into where we can to bring in more efficiency. I don't know if a Public Works Director have anything to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, City Manager. I'll just say broadly, and I agree with the City Manager in many ways, that there are some true benefits to working with consultants and contractors, and I know that's maybe not a popular thing to say, but consultants in particular allow us to ramp up and ramp down. When, particularly in the public sector, you take on an employee, sometimes you have that employee for a very long time, and you have some obligations to that employee. I see the HR team to my right, and they could probably chime in on this, but if we have short tasks or even small tasks that don't warrant a full-time employee, then it certainly may. I'll give an example of our tree trimming. So we do happen to have Carlos Mendoza, who's in the house right now, Maintenance Division Manager. He has some skills and interests and talents with tree work, and he has saved the city money on the tree trimming contract. By doing some of the work in-house, they actually bought some more equipment so they can do more. But we wouldn't want to absolutely eliminate utilization of a contractor. I think our contracts are somewhere around $40,000 for tree trimming. That's not enough to hire a full-time body. And so does that mean that, you know, we just wouldn't do the tree work, or we would hire someone who, a part-time person? In many cases, it's just more efficient to have a contractor do the work as well. I'll add that one of the important reasons we hire contractors and consultants at times is to transfer liability. And so when we take on everything, we're responsible for everything, no matter what happens. When we have a contractor do work and something goes wrong, we can call them back. I know we have some counterexamples where that's proven to be difficult. Let's not talk about that tonight, please. But generally, it's true, and we can go after our contractors and consultants if they underperform or if they don't perform to the satisfaction of the city. So there are many good reasons to hire consultants and contractors. I think because we have so many departments in this small city, it's the onus is upon the department directors to kind of manage what exactly is the workload, what is the expectation of the community, what is the staff capacity within each department, and then when do we need to go out to a consultant or a contractor for extra help. And I could just say that that's something that within Public Works we think about a lot. I mean, we probably have that conversation 3 times a day, depending on the issue, and I'm sure that's true for the other departments as well.
Yes, and I would thank you, Public Works Director. I also wanted to point out that the contractual services, yes, it's true that Public Works is perhaps the largest department with the largest contractual service amount. Like Public Works Director pointed out, other departments have consultants as well, use contractual service as well. For example, we are looking at the waterfront master plan study, and that's a grant. And when you do more, that's a few $100,000 to add to that. And when you do more, that the contractual service will be more. And then we also have this year we also have the paving. That's almost $4 million added to that. So it's my point is that when we do more, and then your contractual service, the amount will go up as well.
Thank you. I appreciate the insights there. And I know it's a balancing act, and I appreciate the balancing that staff is doing. And I would just encourage us to continue to look for those opportunities where we can potentially bring a staff member in. My second question dovetails a little bit into Councilmember Landrum's question. And this may be something not necessarily part of the budget process, but city manager, something that would give us metrics moving forward, just per capita metrics, employees on a per capita basis relative to other cities, say 20,000 population and less, full service versus non-service, revenues per capita, expenses per capita. TOT, and the reason I'm bringing this up is a while back when we were looking at TOT income for the city, I looked at the other tourist serving or destination towns in our county, and I was pleasantly surprised to see our TOT per capita up toward the top. It's just a valuable metric that helps us evaluate how we're doing as a municipality. Thank you.
Mayor, may I add a comment to that? And I think it's I'm just personally interested in this discussion about kind of per capita employees. I would just also add, as someone who's worked for another small city in LA County, 20,000 people, we had far less staff. We had, I think, 27 full-time. We were a contract city, contract police, contract fire, contract building services. Even though the city was bigger, I will say this city, as small as we are, we have a pretty mighty commercial sector that requires a lot of staff to manage in terms of permits, in terms of planning and zoning, and it adds the need for a lot of staff. And we had public works staff to help manage those developments. And I think there's just high community expectations here. In my view, if we were to do any kind of calculation like that, we'd want to have more of a fuller community profile, that it's not just about how many people live in town, but what the town has within it. Because there are some cities, I think of Grover Beach, like the city manager said, that they don't even have a harbor. And so our harbor has how many businesses on it? And what does that mean for city staff? What does that mean for the staffing that we need, that we have? Also, another aspect that might go into that profile is how many advisory boards that the city has. That takes staff time as well. So I think there's a lot of factors other than just population that we may want to consider.
I very much appreciate those comments, Director Kwolek. And as a person that reads through financial audits on a regular basis, a lot of valuable information is found in the footnotes. And those kind of footnotes that would be incumbent upon that type of per capita data would be informational for us and helpful for us all in terms of analyzing our strengths and weaknesses. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions and answers. Really appreciate it. City Manager, Ms. Conrad and staff, I want to thank you so much for going back to the departments and really getting them to kind of drill down on their budgets and where they could cut, and going back to them again. I know that you guys had quite the process, and I really, really appreciate that. I did want to ask a question with regard to, this is back to you, Mr. Kwolek. I guess if you could just kind of tell us the impetus of the utilities manager position, and I'm assuming this is going to be about efficiency because you have so much going on, but if you could just give us a little kind of how that came about.
Thank you for the question, Councilman Edwards. Just to clarify, that's the utilities capital projects manager? Yes. Yeah. Well, this all came about by staff bringing the capital project prioritization report to the city council, and a debrief that I had with city manager Kimball, where you know, it's a belief out there that these I think what we're calling life and safety projects in utilities are just happening. They're sort of no-brainers. Of course, they need to happen, but that contrasted with the reality of, well, the same person who's working on a swing set in City Park is also working on a capacity enhancement for a sewer line on Main Street. And it is not a no-brainer what's the priority. We have a lot of competing priorities in the city. We have a lot of changing priorities. There's a lot of interests and interest from the community on what we're working on. And so we try to create a balance. We try to do paving every couple of years, sidewalks. And so what does that mean for those actual life and safety projects? Does that mean they get pushed to the side? And I will say very directly that historically in the city, the answer is yes. Those projects get pushed to the side. Now, in just brainstorming solutions here, we looked back and we saw that the city used to have a utilities capital projects manager. And so it was like, well, that just makes sense, because out of the 37 or so projects that we reported on a few months ago, and there's, I think, 4 new ones in this budget, the rest are just holdover projects that are already there. But around 12 of them are utilities projects. And if we were to just look at this as cold engineers would, a lot of these projects that we're working on now, we wouldn't even touch. I mean, why would we even do paving if, you know, we have an issue with a water well, right? Or why would we do a sidewalk improvement and remove a tree to make it safer, which would reduce liabilities for the city, you know, if we don't have a backup system, a power backup for our well field. If we lose power, no water. That's a serious issue. But we do have competing priorities. So the idea here and the impetus for the request is let's have one person just focus on those without the distractions, the day-to-day distractions, the putting out of fires, and have them work on that. I think it's also, I think those projects are less political outside of the wharf. They're more straightforward to get done. We do happen to have high turnover at this city, so I don't expect this would be a permanent position, but it would get the city through backlog, hopefully over the next 5 to 7 years. Those 12 projects might be more like 1 or 2. And then projects are added just about every year anyway. And so it just made sense. The other part of it is, I understand, we're sensitive to the question about number of FTEs, as the council should be. The forecasts for the operating fund when combined with capital are, that there's some concerns there that we need to tighten the belt. And we found a way to create this position without too much impacts on the budget, because we can fund it in part through capital costs. So in other words, part of the position is going to be funded by operating costs out of water and sewer fund, and part of it is going to be funded through capital. You'll see tonight in the capital presentation, we have some projects that are, in the $7, $8, $9 million range. If an engineer charges $50,000 worth of their time in a year to that project, it really doesn't make a big dent in that project budget. And by doing that, we can not hit the operating budget. The reason that's important, particularly in the water and sewer funds, is the more we hit the operating budget, the closer we come to having to have to look at rate increases. But if we're hitting capital budgets, we avoid that because it doesn't affect our debt service coverage ratio, which is a loan requirement that we have for a couple of our wharf loans. So that was a long-winded explanation, but we think we found a way to fund it in a clever way, and also to focus on those life and safety projects and utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Kwolek. I actually think that's a really good example of thinking outside the box and looking at short-term and long-term. Appreciate it.
I know he's answered, Greg already answered the question, but I want to add just one thing is also a reflection of your city council's one of the 3 major goals, infrastructure resiliency. And in there, we talk about this infrastructure work and having a dedicated person to manage these kind of infrastructure projects. The hope is to be able to advance city council's priority quicker.
Thank you. Thank you to my fellow council members for your questions, and Director Conrad, City Manager Kimball, thank you for the time you've spent with all of us. I'm good with my questions so far, and Director Qualick and I spent about 2 hours last week talking about these very projects prior to today, so I will refrain questions till later. One more.
To follow up on Councilmember Echols' question, I had this written down, but I forgot to ask, and I'm assuming it's similar, but I'm going to ask it anyways. The engineering services of 1.7 million, it seems like we, I know it's hard to find engineers, but it seems like there's money, there's room in there for possibly bringing that in-house.
Thank you for the question. So again, and I believe Director Conrad mentioned this, but a lot of that is engineering services that we hire out to analyze development projects that were then paid for by the development agreements. So those aren't necessarily services that we would be doing anyway. And those are a bit unpredictable from year to year because it depends on the development project. So just due to that variation, I wouldn't recommend hiring an engineer to do that because we couldn't necessarily count on the money. There are other on-call services, some service contracts that we have to help us. And those are typically specialty services. For example, if we have an on-call contract for a traffic engineer for, I believe, around $40,000. And when items come up, when we get requests from the community to look at, stop sign warrants or things like that, that's where we pull it from. Again, we have it as an on-call contract because that means we only call them when we need them. If we were to hire a body for that specialty, then we'd basically be stuck with a full-time employee. I mean, maybe we wouldn't need them full-time. If you hire a full-time employee, you can't really negotiate them down to part-time. They'll just leave. So it becomes more of a burden to take on a full-time employee than to have those sorts of on-call contracts.
One question that I would like, I don't know if you have the answer, but at least I'd like to have the answer soon. In this budget, how many unfilled vacant positions that are funded are not filled of the 115 that we have currently, or the 117? I'd just like to kind of know that. I mean, or do you know that?
Thank goodness I do. There are 9 at this time. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you, Director Conrad. Please continue. Thank you.
All right, here we go. Marching into Q&E, measures Q&E. Starting with proposed revenues, they're projected to increase slightly, as mentioned before. We have budgeted approximately 2% increase here. The latest projections from a few weeks ago have that increasing a little bit more. And the general fund sales tax, Bradley Burns sales tax decreasing a bit. So between the two, I anticipate them balancing out. So we're budgeting 4.4 million here. And this is just a look back at what the history has been. This is combined, so all sales and use tax, so Bradley Burns and the Q and the E. I'm sorry, that's not what this is. Excuse me. Let me catch up. There we go. Sorry about that. This just shows that how revenues increased once Measure E was passed, from about that 2 million to the 4.7 million, and what we're anticipating for the coming years. So last year, in the 23-24, we saw about 4.5 million. The 24-25 is our budgeted amount. That's 4.3, and that is what the 1.7 green bar is what we had received to date for mid-year. So that's back at January 31st. And then it's showing the blue bar there for fiscal year 25-26, that budgeted amount of 4.4. Looking at our proposed expenses for Q&E, overall, we're seeing an increase of 34% compared to prior year. Personnel is up by 3%, The supplies budget is increasing by 980%, but that only equates to $60,000. The services budget is decreasing by 37%, and the interfund transfers are increasing by 337%. That is because we're proposing increasing the contributions to capital improvement projects. So the total expenditure budget proposed is $5.1 million. The difference between the revenues and expenses would come from the existing fund balance. This graphic shows the split of proposed expenditures across departments, with 17% going to Public Works, 21% to Fire, 20% to Police, 6% to Harbor, 33% to Capital Improvement, and 3% is for vehicle replacements. That's a dump truck, a 1991 dump truck for Public Works. The current dump truck is still in use daily and will be passed on to the water and sewer divisions. And the other vehicle is a replacement patrol vehicle for police. So CFAC did make recommendations as part of their advisory body requirements. Their recommendations include reducing project funding. So the recommendation from that body is to completely remove the $1 million proposed contribution to the annual pavement management program. They recommend that City Council direct staff to focus on the downtown area for the budgeted sidewalk and street repair work. And they also recommend that City Council, upon completion of the standards of cover study, reevaluate the level of personnel in both fire and police departments. Additionally, they recommend a City Council review of a long-range revenue and expenditure projections for Measure QE, and to direct staff to complete a long-range capital needs assessment. And lastly, to take an aggressive approach to selling or monetizing the city-owned properties. They had one last list of three regarding the citywide proposed budget. They recommended looking at the harbor operating fund revenue and directing staff to provide a more realistic and granular projection. Direct staff to create a harbor fund reserve policy that's on par with the water and sewer operating funds. Just to be clear on that, the harbor fund does have a reserve policy. It just has a lower percentage for minimum and target compared to water and sewer. And finally, regarding citywide proposed budget, CFAC recommends using available money in the Economic Development Fund to fund the CFAC Subcommittee on Revenue Generation's recommendations or other revenue generating ideas or research. So those are the committee's recommendations for your consideration regarding the proposed budget. Anything there before we leap on to the capital improvement projects?
Any questions on that section on CFAC?
One question, so when you say the aggressive approach to, I'm sorry, on funding the money from the Economic Development Fund to fund the CFAC Subcommittee on Revenue Generation, what does that exactly mean?
The subcommittee, for the CFAC Subcommittee, has a quite long list of ideas for generating additional revenue. And so I think this recommendation is to take a look at that list and see if we can use some of our existing dollars in the Economic Development Fund to fund some of those ideas, revenue generating ideas. We're meeting again on June 17th to continue looking at that subcommittee's recommendations.
What about me? Oh, I thought we were going this way.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just going to mention with regard to that, Emily, that they would be coming back to us with their report because they were reporting out to, you know, their board members. And do we have a date on that yet? So that'll be helpful to us, I think.
You're looking for a date that the report would come to City Council? I don't think we have that date yet. There's only one meeting in July. Oh. You want-
This is my understanding that Chair Pack is hoping to make to make a report back to council and at the June 24th, the last council meeting. That's a CFAC discussion on their receive their revenue report, and then after that, before the city CFAC chair would like to make a report before the city council.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Edwards, on the CPAC?
Yeah, and the money that they're referring to is that, what is it, 836,000 that's in an account from was that the SB 109 or?
Mm-hmm. Yes, SB 1090 and
1090.
also came from when we first issued permits to the cannabis dispensaries. They had community benefit payments they made. It went into that fund as well. Sorry, I lost your question. Oh, the fund balance. Yeah, that the estimated 836,000 is the estimated ending fund balance for this fiscal year.
Anything else? Councilmember Landrum? Did you have a question? Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I want to approach this delicate subject. I've spoken with you already when we had our one-on-ones, and I've got 3 years to sort of move it forward, and this is the first time that I'm going to introduce it publicly. And it's the concept of our Q&E funds and how they are accounted for and how they're spent. And I find that there's a lot of accounting attention having to be given to how they're spent, and part of that, of course, is via statute because they're initiatives. The way the initiatives are written, however, there's a lot of broad discretion on how those monies can be spent. And so what I'll ask of you, Director Conrad, is if you could speak to that authority of how we can, as a city, spend those dollars and how we account for them, and then any potential to move that toward a simpler accounting and oversight function. And off the top of my head, I'll throw it to you this way. We've got $4.4 million that you indicated that comes in Q&E funds. And on the slide, you had that divided amongst the various departments, and then I know there are different levels. Part of that's personnel, part of that's capital. So it becomes a maze, a Byzantine maze rather quickly. So if there's a way to simplify that and maybe move those expenses up to the higher, broader categories of just capital or personnel or just personnel, my intent is that to explore ways that the accounting and deployment of those funds can be simplified, because I take the opinion that at the end of the day, they're sales tax revenues, and that they're similar in nature other than the citizen initiative nature, but they're similar to us as our general sales tax dollars that come in. So if you could comment on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing you say is you're trying to make our work easier, and I appreciate that. So it is a general tax, and it can be spent at City Council's discretion. However, the ballot language stipulated it be spent specific ways. So in honor of that, the City Council has directed it be spent according to the ballot language. We could certainly simplify how we spend it. For example, rather than having staff paid directly out of the fund, we could do a calculation of certain positions, what those positions cost, and make a transfer out of that fund and into the general fund. Similarly, we could do the same as we're doing that same thing with capital costs. So there's one example. What I would want to make sure we're still able to do is satisfactorily report out how we're spending that money. So we'd have to really keep track of which positions are included to be covered by this funding.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer, Director Conrad. And I want to be clear, too, as I was listening to you answer, that my intent in bringing this forward is not by any means to reduce the allocation of QE funds to any particular department or for personnel. It's all about simplicity and looking at that revenue generator in the city as simply and as directly as possible for strategic planning purposes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, and here we will carry on into our proposed budget for capital projects. So of the total new funding, the total new funding allocation requested is $13.8 million. The $150,000 is the planned use of a sewer reserve, for a total capital request of $13.9 million, nearly $14 million, spread across 14 projects, 10 existing, 4 new. This comes from various funding sources. Most of the budget proposed for 25-26 is for sewer and water projects, which is why the major funding sources are those operating funds. Grants are the next largest category of funding, with additional funding coming from Measure QE, General Fund, Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation, or RMRA funds, also called SB1 funds, the Harbor Fund, and that Sewer Fund planned use of fund balance. So the total coming from the Water Operating Fund is nearly $5 million at $4.7 million. The Sewer Fund would contribute $4.1 million. Grants are a total of $1.5 million. Measure Q&E is $1.7 million. General Fund proposes $1.3 million. RMRA is estimated by the state to be $266,000. The Harbor Fund operating would contribute $169,000, and lastly, that $150,000 from the Sewer Fund, and that's to replace a Ford F-350 crane utility truck. So looking at the capital projects by funding source. First, we have General Fund with the proposed contribution of $1 million for annual pavement and $300,000 for the annual storm drain replacement and major maintenance project. Next, we have the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Fund with that estimated amount of $266,000. Measure QE funds, proposed funding is $1 million for the annual pavement management program. Sidewalk improvements and street tree replacements at $300,000. Storm drain assessment project at $86,300. This would be paired with the $250,000 to constitute 25% of the project. The remaining 75% is grant funded through FEMA, I believe. And lastly, $317,000 for the police radio communications upgrades. That's year one of a 5-year projected cost. And on that note, we'll get around to this more, I'm sure, but the police department, chief of police specifically, is looking into different funding sources for that project and trying to get that funded through grants or other funding. We have grant funding for the storm drain assessment, as I mentioned, that $1,008,900. The Water Operating Fund is budgeted to contribute to the flood proofing of the reverse osmosis water treatment facility at $287,000. The Morrow Basin well field rehabilitation at $1.7 million. The Nutmeg Tank and related pressure zone improvements for $2.5 million, and one of the brand new projects is a water meter replacement. I believe that's looking at $1.5 million over 5 years to replace all of the meters in the city with smart meters. So it's a pretty exciting project that would be a big benefit to all of our ratepayers. And the Sewer Operating Fund is proposed to contribute from their fund balance $150,000 to replace or to purchase a crane truck, replace the crane truck. $4 million for the wastewater treatment plant decommissioning. And it's noted that there's $5 million remaining for carry forward for that decommissioning. The Harbor Fund is proposed to contribute to 3 projects: the boat launch ramp replacement at $69,000, North T Pier repairs at $150,000, and continuing the storm recovery dock repairs at $200,000. Okay, that's the last slide for capital improvement projects that are proposed for this year. Do you want to stop there for any details, questions, comments?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember if it was on the list from CFAC, but this was the itemized, police radio communication upgrades was definitely something that they recommended moving forward with, so I just wanted to point that out, reiterate that.
I think we're good. I think all the members except me were at the CFAC meeting, so I think and I watched at home, so thank you.
Okay, so from here, we go into our a long range look at our finances. And this is the general fund, looking at a 10-year forecast of the general fund based on conditions as they are today. So the 26-27 budget is the last year of our negotiated contracts with bargaining groups and unrepresented groups. So that is based on what we actually expect to spend. The 27, 28, and forward years just have minimal increases, moderate increases to personnel, and will be based on actual bargaining agreements at the time. Property tax, sales tax, transient occupancy tax, those are all increasing between 2 and 3% over time. And transfers in are based on our cost allocation plan. Other revenue has a nominal increase as well. So when we were taking a look at this sheet, there's a lot to look at, I realize, but if we can just take it one column at a time, we'll see that we're estimating for 24-25 to have an operating surplus of approximately $1.6 million. And in the 25-26, this proposed budget has an operating surplus of, you just squeak a little surplus in there of about $52,000. The next 2 years, current revenues are projected to not exceed, to be less than our operating expenditures. So you see those red numbers there. Those balances would have to be covered by available fund balance unless our revenues were able to increase to cover those costs. When you see that fund balance or that surplus start to recover and grow in 28-29 as spending, and I think largely that's due to the personnel costs leveling out, and you start to see a surplus come where revenues are projected to exceed expenditures. I want to note again what I mentioned already, that the user fee study and master fee schedule will bring our revenues up. It just is not included in this proposed budget since we don't have those numbers yet. So this is highlighting the net surplus or shortfall. Most years see a surplus. And then we go on to our capital and other one-time transfers out. So here's where we start to see more red numbers, meaning this would be spending from our fund balance. There's a certain amount that we can sustain, that we can take of spending from the fund balance, since it is above the 33%, but it only takes a few years to use that up and get to a point where our reserve level is below our required minimum of 33%. So this page we're looking at here for 25-26 includes the $1.3 million proposed for capital projects, as well as $110,000 transferring out to our other general fund funds that require a certain minimum reserve and are not meeting it at this point. That's our vehicle replacement fund and our compensable leave fund. So ultimately, we'd spend about 1.4 million from our fund balance and end with a funding balance of about $6 million at the end of 25-26. So I wanted to draw attention here that we are able to, for the most part, cover our operating costs, but need to take a look at how we're going to meet our capital needs in order to maintain our reserve levels. As you can see, the not met starting in, apologize, the headings aren't on there, 27, 28, it's a not met. And even though it's a not met, it's still at 29%, which is still 3 months of operating, which is the intention of the reserve policy at 33%. And then we get down to 20%, that's still 2.5 months of operating. So it looks like a large difference between 33% and 20%, but it's still pretty close to what we're trying to achieve with 3 months, minimum of 3 months of coverage. I put this slide together just to show an alternative. This is simply me literally just playing with the capital contribution numbers to see what it would take to maintain the 33%. And it would not be enough. We know it's not enough to maintain our paving needs, for example, and that's just one project. There, I did highlight it. So within that red box, those are the numbers that I played with to try to maintain our reserve. So 500,000 a year, that's not going to get us anywhere close to the recommended contributions and maintenance to our pavement. So this is what we need to be looking at, is how to increase our revenues so that we can cover our needs. So from general fund, we then go into Q&E. I want to point out here that the blue column 24-25 includes the return of the roundabout project $1.2 million in the transfers in row. So you see that fund balance grow there. And this, even with contributions to capital, we still see a surplus in our, see a surplus in our operating. We do see that we're having to spend from fund balance to contribute to capital, but still maintaining a pretty healthy fund balance in the bottom line, ending fund balance there. This fund does not have its own reserve policy. Its dollars are included in the calculation for the general fund reserve policy. So operating cost looks good with a surplus all across the 10-year forecast. Capital contributions shown here in total, 1.7 for 25-26, 1.6, 1.4, 1.4, keeping a really healthy contribution to pavement throughout the forecast, and ending in a quite positive fund balance every year. Anything on those forecasts before we move on to our other major funds?
Yes. So just for clarification, the police digital radio communications upgrade is spread out over 6 years, so it's almost $2 million?
Yes, I think I said 5 years earlier, but yes, it's 6 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Director Conrad. On the 10-year forecast, you were looking at the 2 years of the shortfall in our general fund. And would you comment, please, on because the personnel cost is the largest expense there, and there's quite an increase that then levels out. And I think some context would help everybody with regard to that. I know that there was a contract done with that had a built-in 5% increase for 3 years, and then I think we staffed up to appropriate staffing levels or necessary staffing levels. And then we can see looking forward that that's really smoothed out. So could you just provide a little bit more context and particularly, when I'm looking at personnel expenses from 12.6 million, then basically 14 million, and then 14.8, but then it smooths out at 15 million in 28. So if you could provide some context, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. The negotiated contract was for 3 years for the bargaining groups and the unrepresented groups, all the way through city manager level, and it's for 24-25, 25-26, and 26-27. So it wasn't just a flat 5%. Our safety groups had larger percents increases and other incentives included, which I can't itemize off the top of my head, but that was due to being well below market compared to other cities. And so with the end of that contract period, I decreased the projected costs there, not knowing what that will be and knowing that we can't afford a whole lot and maintain our reserve. So that's one of the reasons you see a leveling off between those years. Additionally, we're in a peak cluster of years where the UAL costs are anticipated to increase. But we are planning to pull from our 115 trust to keep those costs level at 3.4 per year, 3.4 million per year.
Excellent, thank you. And City Manager, if you could comment, please. We know that we've had turnover in staffing, as a matter of fact, that was mentioned earlier. And one of the reasons that one of the reasons that those contracts were negotiated the way they were, and we've hit current staffing levels, is in an effort to hang on to staff for retention. So if you could just make some general comments on where we are now relative to other municipalities and our competitiveness and how that's increased over or improved over the last couple of years.
Well, thank you for the question. I know when I started here, that the city just came out of the COVID, and then it was my understanding that during COVID time, city employees had took a pay cut somewhat at a time, and so then that contributed to the level of paid compensation that below the market, and then city just finished a compensation study at that time, and it identified many positions that well below the market, and at the same time we have the contract negotiations. So altogether, it was a combination of everything all at a time, and then we wanted to address all these things. And we, to address the compensation study and the contract, these are very big challenge, pose a significant challenge for us. And then we were able to negotiate a longer term contract so that we have more time to retain, to do more, figure it out on the budget level, and then give us time to do other more important things. Because every time we have contract negotiation, I know Mayor and Councilmember Landrum and Councilmember Edwards were here along with two other council members. It was a lot of time on council level as well, because the labor negotiations is just the way it is. Long story short, I do feel that when I know right now we're looking at 4% vacancy rate. I'm looking at HR manager here. Is that 4% vacancy rate as of April, our report? Yeah, and then one, I know a few years ago was lower than that. And then the other thing I wanted to point out was the directors. We had 4 director level positions we'll have to fill, and in the last couple years, and there's a tremendous effort to get the directors filled, retained, and so continue to be productive.
All right, so with that, we'll move on to Harbor Operating Fund. Maybe not. talk amongst yourselves. While we wait, I could make a clarifying point on the PD radio communications upgrade project. So Chief Watkins reminded me that, will let me know that there's actually one extra year in that forecast. It actually is only 5 years. So I'll have to correct that in the forecast. Okay.
It actually doesn't come due until July of 2026, so it is a 5-year, and ends up taking the total budget project from 1.3 million to, I believe, like a 1.6 million total.
Can I ask a question? Chief, was that, I was at the CFAC meeting where it was presented, so were those the proper numbers that were presented at CFAC?
Those were the correct numbers, yeah, and in the report, in the capital improvement report, it is correct.
Great, thank you.
And I believe the percentage rate is below a 5, it's like a 4.62 over 5 years. And again, there's no penalty for prepayment, so, or before the end of the term. So I'm actively working on funding as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you.
One thing that I wanted to find out, if you were mentioning at CFAC, Chief, that you were thinking of borrowing the money in some type of fund, which I have no problem with, but what interest rate are you looking at? And since we do have $87 million sitting in reserves, maybe you can borrow it from that and pay a less interest rate to the city. I'm just curious.
That was something that Director Conrad and I discussed this afternoon, and we can certainly look at that. The interest rate on this loan would be a 4.6 at that 5-year. It goes up a little bit more if you go to the 7-year. So that requires a better mind than mine, and Emily has that, so I'll leave that to her.
Ready to move on? Okay. And we're back. So launching into the Harbor Operating Fund, we're looking at a 5.4% growth in projected revenues and 3.4% decrease of expenditures, that's net of transfers. Personnel costs at 1.5 million, supplies at 81,000, services at 514,000, $34,000 for capital outlay and $681,000 for interfund transfers, which is a combination of transfers to the general fund for the cost allocation plan, as well as transfers from the operating fund to the Harbor Capital Improvement Fund for those projects mentioned earlier. In the Water Operating Fund, we see 0 revenue growth, as rates are not increasing, 1.4% in expenditure growth net of transfers. We've got $1.5 million for personnel, $442,000 for supplies, $3 million for services, $15,000 for capital outlay, just under $1 million for the debt service to the WIFIA portion of the water reclamation facility funding, and $5.2 million in interfund transfers, similar to Harbor Fund. That is for cost allocation plan transfers to the general fund, and also to the IT fund and the risk fund. And the remainder is contributions to the planned capital projects. The last major fund in the city is the Sewer Operating Fund. Similar to water, we have a 0 revenue growth because we have no planned rate increases this year. We see a 30% increase in the expenditure budget, decrease. That's net of transfers. If you look at the debt service line and see the 75% decrease, that's that issue I mentioned earlier where in 24-25 we anticipated having to start paying off the SRF loan, and then that was delayed to September 2027. So we see that decrease there, and the $645,000 for debt service is the actual amount due to WIFIA, which we started repaying in 24-25. So they have $2 million estimated for personnel costs, $500,000 for supplies, $1.5 million for services, $15,000 for capital outlay, the $645,000 as we mentioned for debt service, and $4.6 million for interfund transfers, which would again be for cost allocation plan to general fund, IT fund, risk fund, and the remainder going to capital improvement projects in the sewer capital fund. Just a slide here to go over what those loan repayments are. They began in, I see a typo on my slide. They began in 24-25. There's 2 annual payments, November and May, to the WIFIA or WIFIA loan through the Environmental Protection Agency. It has a 0.83% interest rate, fantastic interest rate. So out of the water fund, we see an annual payment of $900,000, out of the sewer fund, $645,000, for a total debt service from these funds of $1.6 million per year. Since work is still ongoing and we haven't fully drawn down on those loans, WIFIA or SRF loans, there is a potential for these annual amounts to increase. Should we draw down more, well, these annual amounts will increase. So getting close to wrapping up on the presentation part, just the long-term fiscal outlook, the revenues, cities facing revenue shortfalls in the coming fiscal years as costs continue to increase. Operating costs are 100% funded for most of those years. Capital costs, we do need to figure out how we're going to fund all of those needs, what those needs are and how we're going to fund them. The Administrative Services staff plans to complete a risk-based reserve analysis. It's one of the City Council goals, and we plan to then bring those recommendations to City Council potentially by December, but we're working on that timeline. Capital projects, funding sources for future capital projects remain limited, absent any new revenue streams. And so, for City Council consideration, you might want to provide direction regarding CFAC recommendations, provide direction to staff regarding capital project funding levels, and any other direction you may have regarding City Council priorities.
Thank you, Director Conrad. I appreciate that. Thank you, City Manager Kimball, and to all the department staff and all the city. Thank you for all your work towards this budget. We appreciate your time and commitment to it. I will start down at the right with Councilmember LaFay. Questions?
Couple things. Thank you very much for everything, Emily and staff. You know, it seems here definitely that we need to increase revenue, and I don't know if today's the place to talk about it, but 2 very, very quick revenue sources that need to be is we have the Teen Center. And I definitely think, you know, we have Teen Center and Market Street. We should talk about Market Street, what we want to do with it. But the Teen Center is just sitting there vacant. Let's put it on the market commercially and try to sell it for a visitor service so we can attain revenue. The other thing is, I know that Maryland is looking at the short-term rentals, but I think we have an opportunity here sooner than later, not waiting a year, is to look at the short-term rental policy, see really how many 172 permitted short-term rentals we have, and maybe plug in some of the people that are on the waiting list to create an increase in our TOT. The one thing that I tried to figure out here is the capital projects, and this historical figure that you have, I definitely think that thing is worthless, to be honest with you. I mean, I hate to tell you that. It doesn't make any sense. A good example is the paving. You know, you have a historical of $6.7 million, but really the carryover, according to your figures, is 232,000. And so if you're looking at this thing and you're saying, well, I got 16 million here after 2030, that's not really true. And so there's really not a true figure of what we have in paving, because paving is the #1 concern of a lot of our residents. And I would really like to know how much we really have, and maybe we can actually do a paving project sooner than later. So, and then the other thing on the CFAC, I do not accept their recommendation of pulling $1 million out of paving. That's just my vote.
Thank you, Councilmember LaFave. Councilmember Landrum, questions? Do you have any more questions? I'm trying to get.
No, I'm good right now,
Okay.
thanks.
Any more questions? Questions?
Yeah, I did want to ask Mr. Kwolek with regard to the striping. I know that was a previous goal of ours, previous council goal of ours, and I was just wondering, how does that come into play with the paving management program where it is right now? I know we're doing a lot of it right now, but could you speak to that? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Edwards. Yes, there is heavy interplay between paving projects and striping. Anytime we pave, if appropriate, we'll go in and restripe. Not every road needs striping, of course, but that's part of the project now. We are expecting to be finished with striping by June 10th. It would have been this week, but we were concerned that some of the businesses along the Embarcadero wouldn't appreciate if we striped the week of Memorial Day. So we asked contractor to push that out, and they did. And so, yeah, you'll see that conclude in a couple of weeks. And all that striping is that nice thermo stuff. I've already driven it at night up Harbor Street. It looks great. It really makes everything visible. So I'm not sure if you have additional questions there or.
We'll go to comments. I think you have anything else to add right now?
Just on the comments section, the one big comment, and I would like to see brought back to City Council, as it was alluded to today, we have 37 capital projects that were brought to us, I think, a couple months ago with fund balances and things like that. Now we're adding another 13. I mean, some of them are just added to existing projects. I'd like to see a comprehensive list, and not so much how much money is in the fund balance, but whether it's restricted or not. And restricted meaning it has to go to this project, or it has to be returned, or whatever. So that we as council can actually, if we are going to be shortfall in some of our capital projects, we can move money around and see it. I mean, this is not something that you can share with me right now, but I would like to see all the capital projects that we've funded and whether it's restricted or not, so that we can make some decisions in the future.
Councilmember Landrum, comments?
I agree with Councilmember LaFave regarding the paving money. I think that needs to be, that's a really essential part of the city services. I am hesitant with, I mean, having been at the CFAC meeting, it sounded like with the communications, the unfunded mandate from the government for that project, that there were alternatives. I'm kind of, that's just a lot of money. It seems like possibly, we could be creative and work around that for a while, maybe something more in future years, something more affordable may pop up. And then I'm really interested in, some of the services and really like making sure we can, go through those and well, I know you did, but just maybe take a second look at those. Also, I'm really interested in the the comparison of staff in cities with similar size and full service cities, all of that. So those are my comments.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments. I also echo Councilmember LaFay's idea about having restricted funding indicators. I think that would be very helpful. Does seem like a question that gets asked often. Also, with regard to the radio communication, I mean, that's a safety situation, and so I deem that pretty high. Whether or not there's some way to look at, how we fund it, I don't know. I leave that up to you. I trust in you doing that. But I also am looking forward to CFAC's presentation on June 24th with regard to the revenue ideas. I think that's going to be really key for us. Clearly here, this is about generating revenue. There's no way around it. We've got to do it. We've got to figure it out. And so I do have some ideas moving forward that hopefully we'll be able to discuss then. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember LaFay. We need to look at our portfolio of assets, particularly real estate assets, and how we can turn those into either immediate cash or some type of revenue generation. And we're actually in the process of doing that. We've started doing that. So I think we all, or I know at least I want to put an asterisk on that as well. As our conversation moves forward, something that CFAC recommended, and I agree wholeheartedly with, was focusing on the downtown area that is listed in our city goals. By the way, the street maintenance is listed in there as well. There was a public comment earlier about that, so that is on our city goals. But focusing perhaps some of the 1090 funds toward downtown specifically. One thing I'm concerned about with the 1090 funds is we seem to have been chipping away at them, and this is just a general comment, I suppose, for the folks up here. We've been chipping away at them over the last several years, and I think the impact can be minimized when we just chip away at it and use some of the funds here, some of the funds there. One of the things that we may want to consider is looking at some more robust programs directed toward downtown and taking a more significant portion of those 1090 funds, because they are earmarked as economic development funds for that type of program. And what exactly that will look like right now, I don't know. I would rely on the genius of my colleagues and our staff members and our community. And then touching on the pavement management plan, and I suppose this will lead to a question that I forgot to ask earlier. We've got the $1.2 million in Q&E funds that is being that moved from our roundabout project back over to unallocated Q&E funds. Can you, I don't know if I spaced out on that portion of your presentation. If I did, I'm sorry. But can you expound on that a little bit and how potentially we can work that into our budget deliberations here? And the prelude of what I'm thinking about is we've talked about, CFAC is talking about removing $1 million contribution to the annual pavement management plan, but then we've got this potentially new source, this $1.2 million that's been reallocated. And if you could talk about maybe an incremental approach to that as well. I'm going to be curious to see what the other council members have to say about it, but there may be, it may be prudent for us to take an incremental approach, because I will throw this out there as well. The forecast for the economy is murky. We don't know exactly where the economy is going to be 6 and 12 months down the road. I follow it very closely because I'm in the finance and lending industry, and it's difficult to forecast right now. Even the major corporations, the S&P 500 corporations, are limiting their visibility on their earnings estimates moving forward because it's sort of planning for the next 90 days right now as opposed to the next year. So that said, we may want to err a little bit to, this is already a conservative budget, which I appreciate, and in deploying additional funds, we may want to, I don't want to say err to the side of conservative, but be conservative by perhaps approaching those funds in an incremental fashion. So allocating some of that now and then looking at 6 months down the road, perhaps allocating more. So long-winded way of saying, could you comment on that, please?
Okay, let's see. So 1.2 million is to be returned from the roundabout project to Q&E. That will happen in this current fiscal year, and that will increase the available fund balance. So I think the reason, if I understood correctly, the reason that the CFAC recommended to you to not fund the $1 million in pavement was not financially motivated, but rather they didn't anticipate it could actually be spent and didn't want to see it sit in that project. They'd rather see it sit in Q&E fund. So I'm not sure if that helps to clear up some things for you. It is up to this city council to allocate funds as you see fit. So you could, yeah.
So thank you. So that's a fine point. So that recommendation was based in part then that if that money went toward pavement management without the expectation really of it being spent in the coming 12 months because it would be rolled as we did with this last project that worked out very well. So that was some of the reasoning behind that.
Yes, as I understand it, that was the reason. They
Great.
wanted to see it stay in Q&E rather than sit in the project fund.
Excellent. Thank you. That adds some context.
I just want to confirm that, because I heard that very loud, I heard that loud and clear as well.
Any other comments right now? Thank you. I'm going to piggyback on that then, since that's where we're at right now with the Q&E funding. I'm going to support the allocation to continue, and I appreciate CFAC's comments in meeting with Director Kwolek, you know, and seeing how successful having a larger sum of money has been to get paving done. As he's explained, it's a lot more cost effective to mobilize once than mobilize every year or year and a half. And as we're just coming off this project, they wouldn't have the capacity to even begin to plan for a project that's going to happen in the fall or the spring because of our paving weather and timelines in the city. So I want to make sure the money's there allocated, because this time next year when we're having this conversation and hopefully adding another $1 million, they will already have those scores in place and a plan moving forward, so that next fall we will be paving, so that we aren't having to wait 3 years. And if we continue to allocate this money, you know, next year when we revisit this, we will have close to $3 million and another $1 million hopefully, and we'll have that $4 million again. So it's got to be plugged in there. Hopefully we're making money off of it, and it's, you know, not just sitting in a fund. So I support it wholeheartedly. It brings me back to the question then about the radios, and I again would defer to the city manager and our finance director, but at $1.9 million, if we're paying 4.5%, 4.6%, my question is, what are we getting on our money invested right now? If we're only getting 3% or 4%, and those market rates are going down, then we're upside down on our investment versus, you know, funding something outright. That isn't going to put us at risk. I again would defer that to you, because I certainly would prefer not to be making payments. That being said, you know, we have other extremely large capital projects, so it's a balancing game, and I hope that you'll have some opportunity to try and weigh that out. And I trust in you and your level of knowledge. I agree with Councilmember LaFay that we need, and those we need to address our real estate portfolio, and am certainly ready and willing and able to move on selling some property like the teen center and/or both Market Street. Not as interested in visiting SDR increases, as I guess we probably have different opinions. But I also want to recognize that visiting last week with the industry leaders, excuse me, from Visit Morro Bay Tourism, as well as Visit SlowCal, although the revenues aren't extreme, they are up, and especially for Morro Bay over other municipalities. And, you know, a year and a half ago, or 2 plus years ago, the Hampton Inn was built and added 83 rooms. And this year we've got the Harbor Villas over on the corner. We've got a hotel going in down here on Front Street. We have the Quonset Hut up here. We have Associated Pacific's project going in. So we have more rooms coming online and an opportunity. And this isn't going to save us in revenue enhancement. I think it's a combination of continuing to cut expenses, to be vigilant about not filling non-essential positions right now. When I served on council before, many years ago, we were faced with laying people off, and I don't want to have to go down that path again. So I think we need to be very conscientious of that, filling the positions that are essential, but perhaps as long as we can, the others open. The potential for the decommissioning of the wastewater treatment plant here, which is the bids have come in for the consultant to begin that process, and the revenue opportunities that that's going to provide us in the next few years. I would just, in the simplest terms, without any real facts, say, you know, take Morro Dunes revenue for TOT and rent and things and times it by 2, because it's such a larger space, and glamping is the big thing. And so you have those revenue opportunities. I appreciate CFAC having a subcommittee looking at those things. I hope that they're in line with Visit Morro Bay. They have $1 million budget, and they do a phenomenal job marketing Morro Bay. Events and things are great, but I don't think the city has the staff resources to oversee those kind of things, and we really need to depend on Visit Morro Bay, the Chamber, and other groups really to do those things. I'll be curious to see their presentation on the 17th, but I'm not willing to, at this time, fund our development, our economic development money towards that. The opportunities for increased revenue through visitor serving, to me, I see coming our way with the Toro Creek Preserve and the bike connector between Morro Bay and Cayucas. I think when you take that and add that with that, how many acres is the wastewater treatment plant, Mr. Qualick? 10, 20, whatever it is? I know. I should have asked Tamara, she knows the answer. Anyway, those opportunities for new tourism, ecotourism over the next few years as we go facing this budget challenge, I also see this opportunity where our community has made it very clear that their opportunity for revenue enhancements is not through industrialization of our waterfront. I think we've heard that you know, there's less desire for batteries or wind and those things than there is for enjoying our estuary and other natural resources that we can capitalize on. So I'm hoping that we go that direction with what that looks like and focus on that as a revenue enhancement. It's served us well in the 47 years I've been here, and sitting up here for, this is my 6th, 7th budget. We always face this. It's always I mean, I don't want to say doom and gloom, but we have to be, I'm a fiscal conservative, so, you know, I don't want to spend money we don't need to, and I know how hard it is for everybody in this community to work to put those tax dollars in. So I feel a huge responsibility in how we use them. So at this time, I would be looking for some recommendations then that we want to provide, and I would start with asking if we're in agreement on the CFAC paving money to continue, the $1 million. Yes? Okay. So with that,
Yes, but not, are you saying to put it forward to the next year? Or, I mean, I just don't know that there's not a way to do it paving in this year if it's not
Well,
in a business area?
I could say it's not, but I'll let Mr.
I mean, don't we have a pavement management plan where we could look at what streets need paving and?
Thank you for the question. So we have an idea of what streets we'd be looking at, but there's obviously some design work that would need to go into it. And realistically, if we do design early part of calendar year next year, we cannot pave in the summer because there is a city council resolution that prevents us from doing that because we have a tourist economy in the summer. And so no matter what, we wouldn't pave until next fall. And so what we would want to do is put it out to bid in the summer so that we can get paving done in fall before the holidays. If we don't know how much money we're looking at for the project, we probably, if it's like $1 million project, we'd probably just wait a year because we would get bad pricing. It would take a lot of staff effort for little impact, and we would focus on other projects. If the Public Works Department had a better idea of how much money that we'd actually have to implement a project like this, then, well, we'd be more likely to actually take it on versus focusing on other priority projects.
Well, so is the policy for all streets? Because I understand the need for the policy in commercial areas, but I don't understand for the need for the policy in.
I'm looking at City Engineer Cindy Cecil, if she recalls. I believe it was for citywide. So, yeah, so potentially we could waive that by action of the city council. But again, if we don't know how much the money we have for the project, and we don't really know what to plan for. So the money is like being put into a bank account, and then we know what we can spend. If we don't know what we can spend, then we don't really have a basis to plan a project.
Right. I'm a little bit concerned about falling behind. Well, I mean, we are every year we put it off. We're falling behind on our keeping up with the maintenance of it, and so that's concerning to me.
Yeah, and so to not fall behind, we'd be spending $4 to $4.5 million a year just to keep up with our current rating.
Right.
And so I certainly would recommend adding as much money as we can to it. The longer we put this sort of maintenance work off, the more expensive the work gets because the streets degrade. So just if you're asking from the Public Works standpoint what good policy would be, it would be to budget the funds, and then assuming that we have enough to put together a good project, perhaps we could get it out to bid earlier so that we're doing work in summer, depending on what streets we're doing, of course. But again, if we have a million or even $2, that doesn't go very far these days with paving. And I just recently saw a stat that between now and 10 years ago or so, we're getting about half the miles for the same dollar. So it used to be that you don't want to do a paving project under a million, and now it's much more than that because the pricing is just so bad that you get from the contract. It's not worth the contractor's time to come out here unless they're getting paid more than it's really worth, right? So I'm not sure.
I don't know. I guess I can see your point, but then by the same logic, if you put it off, it's going to be more expensive too. So you're kind of in a catch-22. And if other cities have the same policy of dates where they avoid paving, maybe if we pave during those times, we might get a better rate. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not going to support paving during the summer. We had a lot of pushback just running up against holidays in the community, from the business community.
Oh, I'm not.
Even in the residential community, we have a lot of vacation rentals and a lot of summer visitors that are out, infiltrating within our streets. But again, I think my concern is capitalizing on the largest amount of money we can to mobilize once rather than, every year. And staff capacity, because we also have on the list of capital improvement projects, the sidewalks and street trees and things that we've put in that goal of downtown revitalization and vitality. And so for me, I hope that that's where the focus is over the next year. Yes, please, Mr. Flash.
And thank you, Mayor. If I may add one thing, maybe this is a question for Director Conrad, but, whether the money sits in just general Q&E or within the pavement management project, the city's earning the same interest rate regardless, right? It's just there's no difference from a revenue standpoint on that.
The interest earnings wouldn't change depending on where the cash is sitting on our books, but the way it's distributed across funds would change because the way we distribute it to funds is based on a cash balance of those funds for 24-month average. So if we kept it in Q&E would see interest earnings on that money. If we moved it to the capital improvement fund in the pavement management program project, the interest would go to the general fund.
Just thought that might be helpful context.
Thank you.
And I'll just add one thing, sorry. If we're talking about $1 million from general fund and $1 million from Q&E, plus potentially $1 million left over from this year's project, though we don't have all the invoices in yet, that would be around a $3 million project, and that's something that, from a staff standpoint, we would pursue for the next year. If it's a $2 million project, now it's sort of borderline worth it.
That allows us the opportunity also at mid-year budget to revisit what our summers looked like and have more of a pulse on our revenue tourism stream and our Q&E balance also, so we could readdress that and potentially have that other backfill for that to move it a little quicker in the pipeline. So.
And Madam Mayor, a question relevant to this discussion, the striping issue, is the striping included in the pavement management plan, or is that a separate account?
It's included in the pavement management plan.
Okay. So,
unless we're talking about striping outside of a paving project, then that would be different money.
that is different money.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll address that a little bit later then. Thank you.
And that's a challenge because you don't know if that street's going to be one you're going to come back to a year or two from now and do that. And I know a lot of the, and thank you for that on the striping and markings, a lot of it's been delayed because of waiting for the paving and then those new laws that have gone into effect as far as spaces back from crosswalks and things. So I'm looking forward to them getting here to finish that. It's pretty bad on some of those streets without, it's like a freeway. So we're in agreement then that we continue to move that money into that fund. I think it's better to have it allocated there than sitting in Q&E so that the plan is there. Okay, what's next? What was the other? Yes, City
Mayor and Council, yeah, I wanted to comment on the capital improvement project overall and your relationship to the Public Works Department capacity. Talking about paving, that's very, very important, but also, I want to remind the council that Public Works Department Engineer Division alone handles paving and everything else. It's even the harbors, the harbor revetment, the harbor dredging, harbor project are also being oversaw by the engineer division. So we just want to be mindful of the engineering capacity to oversee so many large cost projects at one time.
Thank you, City Manager Kimball. And I think that not even being done with this year's project would make it very difficult to try and transition into the next one. And also with the new, if we approve the position for the project manager, that should alleviate some of that responsibility that the city engineers carrying the burden of all those projects and shift some of that over. So what else do you need from us, Director Conrad, for direction? Anything specific?
We handled the one financial recommendation from CFAC, so we can check that. They did have other non-financial related recommendations, so if you had anything you want to follow up with on those, I can put the slides back up if that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember LaFay? No? Councilmember Landrum? I'll come back. Councilmember Eccles?
I don't have anything on that, but I do have something else that I would like to mention. So if I could do that now or after you're done with this
Why don't
portion?
we finish this
Yeah.
portion so she can wrap that up? Anything else, Councilmember Edwards? No? So I think we're comfortable with the budget, and you heard most of our comments about the unfilled positions, City Manager Kimball, and the desire to revisit our portfolio of real estate with potential for revenue, whether it's through sales or some other stream, and any other strategies that are going to support us in keeping this budget moving forward. Councilmember Eccles, you had something?
Yeah, thank you. So under the infrastructure, we spoke last night at the council meeting and added a future agenda item for the potential pedestrian safety enhancements at the 41 Main roundabout. I'm not sure, we're moving money around, and I would like to start moving money toward that. I think I made myself clear last night, and we got support up here from the council members that I think the community has also expressed its intent that something needs to be done there in the interim of a larger project. So how would staff suggest we approach moving some money? I know that's a big question, but yes.
Can I jump in here? And City Engineer Cindy Cecil and I had a discussion about this morning, and we could potentially just pursue these interim ideas out of the roundabout budget. We still have some grant funds in there, and I don't know that there's a need at this time, after consideration and consultation with the city engineer, for us to have any additional money. That request might come later, or we might need a larger defined project later, or not. Maybe it's just something we can handle quickly if we're lucky. And so I would just suggest that with the council direction that we received last night to pursue these interim solutions at that intersection, we have what we need in terms of direction, and we have a starting budget for it as well.
Music to my ears. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Can we also, is there any consideration of using some of the development impact fees there also for any of that?
That would be an option if we can tie capacity improvements to,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Did you have something? No? Anything else?
I just had one more general comment. There was, in public comment, the talk about ROI, return on investment, relative to municipal, to capital investments. And I think I want to thank staff for their presentations and the input that was given. You know, a municipal government, a municipal entity, obviously, is much different than a for-profit or even a nonprofit organization, just in terms of ROI and capital investment. We're a service organization, you know, the city is, and we're here to serve the residents. So it's not about just ROI. We need to make prudent fiscal decisions, of course, and maximize our resources and assets in terms of delivering the best services that we can to our citizens. So it's a philosophical notion that is an important one in the delivery of municipal services, and I just wanted to put that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kwolek, we didn't have an opportunity to share your statement last night or your update for our travel time next month. Did you want to do that now? Hopefully people who are watching this meeting will get some of that information as far as the facilities.
Sure, I can. And Mayor, if I could just add one other comment relevant to the
course.
budget discussion and capital. I heard some pretty strong consensus around having a full picture of the full capital portfolio. As just a reminder, one of the city council goals is public infrastructure, and within that goal is a task to do a capital improvement plan, and Public Works Department would envision as lead on that goal that we would have that kind of full picture, including some of the financing as part of that. So that's, in short, already coming.
Thank you for that.
And then the big announcement is that we are going to start the Vets Hall audiovisual upgrade project next week, and that will have implications on this building. However, all public meetings, all Brown Act meetings, advisory board meetings, commission meetings, city council meetings, and the WAMPAC will still be able to take place here in the Vets Hall. We will have the meetings in the dais by the windows in that annex area of the building, facing south, and the audience will sit basically where they're sitting now, just face that way. And there might be some materials and equipment laying around here. So it'll be a bit of a smaller footprint. Hopefully, we don't have any exciting items, so we don't fill up the entire room, because there might be some difficulty seeing. But we found that it's a good solution. It'll allow us to continue broadcasting on Channel 20. And we plan to do that through the month of June and also through about half of July. And I believe, I didn't look at the calendar, I apologize, maybe around July 21st, we'd resume meetings back up on the stage.
And we only have one meeting in July, so we're good till the end of July.
Correct, but there are planning commission meetings and some other advisory boards as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anything else from any of the directors, departments? Thank you again to the finance team. Emily, thank you. Melissa, welcome aboard. We appreciate you being here. City Manager Kimball, thank you for your work on the budget. I know it was a lot for the two of you to jump in there and finish that out with the change in staffing, so thank you. And all the department heads, thank you on behalf of the council for your contributions. With that, we're adjourned.